This is the second video of the ninth class for social psychological perspectives on health. In the first video, I talked about a transactional model and I explained that social support can be used as a coping option. So basically, people can tackle the stressful events not only with the resources they themselves have, but also they can use social support as a coping option. And but the social support can be considered as the amount of social support they have can be divided into the amount of social support they receive, and also the amount of social support they are actually supported. And I explained that social support they feel that they are actually supported is really important, matters for our health. In addition to that, model can be improved by incorporating the idea that people not only understand or process the information of the situation as an individual, but also they do so as a member of a group. Okay, so while the traditional transactional model is very individualistic, if they incorporate the idea of social identity, then they can better understand how people actually appraise a situation, and such appraisals can be different depending on how they see themselves and how they categorize themselves. Okay, so that was what I explained in the first video, and here I would like to give you some examples supporting the idea. So first, this is the study done by Levine and Lacher. So this study was done with sports science students, and then this is what they did. Okay, so first they manipulated the social identity salience in the so basically they made two different kinds of social identity salient. In the first situation, in the first condition, they asked participants to compare the responses of men and women. So basically, there were both participants were either men or women, and then by asking them to compare the responses of men and women, then their gender identity became salient. Okay? And in the second condition, they asked participants to compare sports people with other professionals. So basically, in this situation, regardless of the gender, their sports identity was made salient. Okay? And then after making one of the identities salient, they were asked to read a scenario and then asked participants to imagine that they are in the scenario or they are the protagonists of the scenario. Okay? And one of the scenario was about a damaged knee, and then the other one was a facial scar. Okay? And either of these scenario were presented to participants in the first condition or participants in the second condition. Okay, so basically, participants were divided into two groups. One of them were made in one of the conditions, participants' gender identity was made salient. And in the other conditions, in the other group, participants' sports identity was made salient. And each group was further divided into two groups. And in one of the groups, so let's say group 1A or group 2A led the damaged knee scenario. And in group 1B and then 2B led a facial scar scenario. And after reading the scenario, participants responded to questions like how upset they would be and how much it would adversely affect their lives and distressful emotions. Okay, so basically, all the participants responded to the same items after reading the scenarios. Okay, so here are the results, what they found. So basically, there was a significant difference between sports identity and gender identity when participants were female and female identity relevant scenarios were presented. So here, okay. So basically, a facial scar may have may have a more significant impact on female, but such impact would be particularly significant when female was made, when their female identity was made salient. Okay? So, although all women may have female identity, social identity approach argues that it's not whether they have such identities or not. It's about how they categorize themselves at this moment, at the moment they process information. Okay? So, as you can see, when gender identity was made salient, they felt more stress when they read female identity relevant scenarios. Actually, well, the levels of stress they experienced was higher when they read the sports student identity relevant scenario, regardless of their regardless of identities being salient. But maybe this is because, sports identity was much more important for those students, because that's something they are studying right now, right? So maybe there is a reason that manipulation of social identity salience didn't really work. But so when they read the sports student identity scenario, okay? And but when the female identity relevant scenarios were read by participants, the scenario had more significant impact on female participants whose gender identity were made salient. Okay, so although both participants in the sports identity and gender identity condition were both female, but just because of the salient identity being different, they responded differently to the items. Does it make sense? So, these results kind of tell that how they define themselves change how they understood the scenario. And because the understanding of the scenario was different, their responses were also different. This is really consistent. This is really consistent with the transactional model, but consistent only through the view that their appraisal is different depending on their identities. Okay? There's another study showing a support for this, social identity approach. And this study was done by Hazram and I think his colleagues, basically the authors of this textbook. And then they asked bar staff and bomb disposal officers the same questions, basically. And the y-axis indicate the perceived stressfulness, and orange bar indicates how much they experience stressful if they work as a bar staff or bomb disposal officers. And blue bar indicates how much they experience stress if they work as bar staff and bomb disposal officers. Okay? And then left two bars are the responses of bar staff, and then right two bars indicates the responses, indicate the responses of bomb disposal officers. Maybe before you actually see these results, you may simply expect that uh, participants should more stressfulness if they imagine that they work as bomb disposal officers, and the stress that they would experience as bar staff should be much, much, or even much, much smaller like this, right? But this wasn't the case. So why bomb disposal officers found their work unstressful? Basically here, when bomb disposal officers responded to the perceived stressfulness, they uh, expressed that they would feel much less stressfulness compared to the situation when if they work as bar staff. Okay, so this difference. One of the explanation for this may be they are habituated to and normalize the activity as a group. So this is called acceptance coping. So this is basically what we do usually. So I'm very much habituated, accustomed to the work I do. And then that kind of habituation of acceptance reduces stressfulness. Another explanation may be the activity of diffusing bombs affirmed their social identity and made them feel good about themselves. So, they are kind of proud of diffusing bombs. And then proud, such pride makes them feel less stressful and even makes them feel good about it. Okay. To affirm themselves as members of distinctive and elite professional groups make them feel good. And this is kind of process that they are going through. But anyway, I think the important point here is that it's not really objective job type that determines the levels of stressfulness, but instead how you categorize yourself either as a bar staff and bomb disposal officers. And depending on your identities, the stress you may experience would be very different. If you usually work as a bar staff, and then if your identity is a bar staff, then imagining that you would work as a bomb disposal officers would be so much stressful. But if your identity is bomb disposal officers, then doing exactly the same thing is not as stressful as uh is not as stressful as it may be for bar officers, bar staff. And actually for bomb disposal officers, working as a bar staff is even more stressful for them because that's incongruent with their identity. Okay, so basically this is again supports that, any situation really doesn't determine how much they may experience stress, but how they understand the situation determines the amount of stress they experience, and how they understand the situation is determined by what kind of identity they have. Okay. Right. So limitations of situational approaches. This is, I'm referring to this one, the situational model, social readjustment rating scale. Okay. This approach is to quantify the stress of a given life event or a given profession, like marriage, Christmas, loss of close friend, you know, or a bomb ulcer, burn stuff. But each individual applies its stresses differently. This was a problem, you know. Marriage is not as stressful as it may be for everyone. It would have different levels of stress for each individual. And stress appraisals is determined by an individual's subjective experience and understanding, and also by appraisals of other people who share social identities. So this is something interesting, you know. It's not only about how you see it as stressful, but it could be also influenced by how others who share social identities with you understand the situation. And then you may think that, okay, because they think this as not so stressful, and I belong to same group, I have same identity as they do, so I should also feel this situation as not so stressful. Okay. So stress appraisal is not only subjective, but also intersubjective. It's of course not objective, you know, it's not same for everyone. It depends on who perceive it. It depends on who experiences it, but also with how others experience the situation also influence how you experience the situation. So appraisal of stress-inducing mathematical exercise. This is another experiment I would like to introduce. Okay. So manipulation of previous participants group members. Okay, basically, they're going to work on mathematical exercise, very stressful mathematical exercise. And then before they go through it, there's another participant who just finished mathematical exercise. And then they manipulated who finished the mathematical exercise before the participants. The first condition is a typical first year psychology student. Okay, so the basically participants were psychology student, and then the someone who just completed mathematical exercise before the participants also was also a typical first year psychology student. And the second condition was a typical stress disorder sufferer. Okay. So, very different kinds of people. One of them is an in-group member, and the other may be considered as an out-group member. Okay. And then you see the video content filmed, filming the, someone who just completed the exercise. In stressful condition, the so basically the typical psychology student said that in the video, said in the video that the testing experience was very stressful. My heart was pounding and I couldn't concentrate. I got more and more stressed. So basically the person who should be very similar to the participant tells that, that was very stressful. Okay? But in the challenging condition, interviewer asked, how stressful did you find the task? And the respondent, who should be similar to the participant, says it was a positive experience, nothing bad about it. In fact, I found the test challenging and enjoyable. So, this is rather positive comment. And then, okay. In the second condition, participants also see the either stressful video or challenging video. Okay. And after seeing the video, they report perceived stress and subjective anxiety. Okay. So I guess this was asked before the exercise. And then let's see what they found. So in the in-group condition, basically psychology student. This is 1, 2, and this is A, and this is B. Okay. Yeah. And in group condition, uh, let's compare here. So when someone who just completed the exercise said that the experience was very stressful, participants also reported stress compared to when someone said the experience was challenging, rather positive, you know. But if they see the same video, but they were told that the guy in the video was not someone similar to you, then the video content didn't really affect their responses. Basically, they reported the same levels of stress. Okay. So again, now in this case, participants categorize themselves as a typical psychology student. And but information came from different person. In condition A, the information came from an in-group member. And in the first condition, the information came from an in-group member. And in the second condition, the information came from out-group member. And then the information affected their responses, participants' responses, only if the information came from an in-group member. So in this sense, the appraisal is not only subjective, but also intersubjective, that is influenced by in-group members. Okay. And, maybe you want to remember that hypothesis 7 mentioned in the chapter 2 that uh, you would be more influenced, and then people who are typical person would have more influence on how others think and believe and feel. Okay. So appraisal of the task was influenced only when the message was from someone who shares a social identity, in other words, in-group member. And a study of physiological responses to pain in which sorry, in which I cannot say it, reassurance, maybe I'm putting a wrong word here, but was or was not provided by students who were studying the same or different subject than participants. So this is another study which is explained in chapter 12, which I think I'm not gonna cover. But anyway, so basically this is the level of physiological response, maybe sweat on their hand, I guess. And then what they found was that, so basically, participants were going through the painful experiment. Okay. And then, but before going through the experiment, there was a student who just finished the same experiment, and then they told the participant that, that was that wasn't too bad, or maybe, it was painful, but you should be okay, something like that. But the student's identity was manipulated. Okay. In one condition, there was out group, meaning that someone who are different from participants. In the other condition, there was in-group member. And then in the control condition, basically they did not receive any reassurance from others. And what you can see is that when participants did not receive the assurance, or when they did receive the reassurance, but from an outgroup member, that didn't really affect their physiological response. Physiological response to something they cannot control, you know. They cannot really, how can I say, intend to control. They don't have power to change by themselves. It's kind of automatic. Okay. But when the reassurance came from an in-group member who is similar to participants, then their physiological response decreased. So they felt much better. They were not stressed out. Okay. So not on maybe yeah, I have the note below here. So not only a self-reported measure, but physiological measures also showed similar results. And then interestingly, in this case, the influence was not really mediated by the representativeness, meaning that it wasn't really important how an in-group member was perceived as representative or typical member of the group, but it depended on how much they felt supported by the member, by the person who gave a reassurance to them. So meaning that, basically they received reassurance from both out-group member and in-group member, but the amount they felt social support, the amount they felt that they are supported was different depending on from whom it came. When it came from out-group member, they didn't feel much supported, and thus it didn't affect their physiological response. But when it came from an in-group member, then they felt more supported, and it reduced stress that they would experience. Okay, so again, same situation, but different understanding of the situation. And the understanding was constructed by the group membership that they share or not. And also, this is another study, but a stressful public speaking exercise induced less stress indicated by low cortisol levels, another hormone or a physiological response, when their social identity and the connection with fellow students were previously made salient. So basically, in this study, participants were asked to give a speech in front of some individuals and also the video recorder. Okay. But before making a speech, there were several manipulations that made them feel that they are part of a group in group condition. And in another condition, such manipulations were not present, and basically they were made aware that they are just some individual person in that experiment. Okay, so basically they were uh, in one condition, they were made aware that they are part of a group, and in another condition, they were such manipulation wasn't present basically. So they maybe have to think that they themselves as an individual. Okay. And then just being reminded of the fact that they are a part of a group made them feel less stressed. Cortisol is an indicator of stress. Cortisol is a hormone that indicates how much stress they experience. So not only self-report, but these physiological measures also indicates that by feeling that they are a part of a group or by accepting a reassurance from in-group member, their physiological responses are also different. Okay, interesting. Okay, so I think I will just stop here and then I will finish chapter 5 in the next class, in the 10th class, I think. And then I will go to chapter 8. This is chapter 5. And then in the next class, I will go to chapter 8. So if you want to have a head start, actually in the 10th class, I will finish the chapter 5 and then we'll start chapter 8. So maybe you would like to start reading chapter 8 if you have already finished chapter 5. Okay, so that was it. Thank you very much.